Smoant. Now there's a name from the past. Smoant made some rather interesting devices way back in the day, like 2015, 2016. And they basically built their name over the advanced vaping side of things. They did come out with a couple of really interesting RTAs back in the day. The Smoant Mobula, I think that was his name. It was like a huge bell cap glass on it with a steel cap, and it was a big, I've got it here somewhere, it was a big tank. But then Smoant decided to drift more into the mainstream than rather concentrate on the advanced hobbyist side of vaping, because let's face it, mainstream is where the money is. That's where the money is. So what Smoant decided to do was go into the kits, basically the kits, and what they're now doing is they're going into the current generation of pods. They've been very, very quiet as of late. They haven't really released much, so when this popped up, I was kind of surprised. This is the Smoant Pasito Mini, and it's the shrunk down version of their original Pasito AIO. They never really marketed the Pasito, the old Pasito, they never really marketed that as what we would consider a pod kit. It was more in line with what was considered AIOs back in the day. So how well does this little, well, kind of big fella perform? Only one way to find out. It's time for a... This is kind of much closer to a pod kit. So no, that's what we're going to call it. It's time for a pod kit review. So in the box for the Pasito Mini, you get a red coloured USB-C charge cable. That's unusual. You do, of course, get your spare coil. You have got your user manual, and you've got your basic safety information sheet as well. Having a look at the Pasito Mini's pod, first of all, it's an unlocked and unsealed pod, which means this does take external coils. If we, well, try not to drop it, Vic. If we pull this coil out, what we've got here is the P1 coil. Zoom you in. We've got the P1 coil, and you can see there it is 0.6 ohms. That's that one there. If we pull the spare coil out of the packaging, wow, why are you not coming out? There we go. This one here, we have got the P3 coil, and this one's coming out at bang on 1 ohm. If we line them up side by side, you can definitely see there is a major difference between the bore. This is your 1 ohm coil mouth to lung, this is your direct to lung coil, and this does have a very rudimentary, it's very simple, very basic, but it does have a very rudimentary airflow control. So the bore diameter on these coils is definitely going to matter, depending on what coil you actually pop into the AIO tank. Filling this thing up is easy. You just pull this little rubber stopper there, and you've got a nice big fill hole. Let's pop a coil in here before we pop juice in, obviously. So the flat part of the coil there lines up with the flat part there. So you want to line it up like that, give it a wiggle, and then the whole thing should just pop in. Now we'll just pop some juice in here while we have a look at the battery part, shall we? Some lemon meringue from the fine folks over at the Rochford project. So let's just pop the juice in there. That should do it. And of course, if it is a brand new coil you're dealing with, get your tank, pop it to one side, and let that coil soak up the liquid. So onto the actual battery part of this thing. Zoom this out slightly. At the very top, you have got 2 magnets on either side to hold on to the tank. You've got your positive and negative terminals here to actually put power into the coil. On this side, Pasito Mini, and it's 1 big fingerprint magnet. On this side, you have got a very basic screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That switches it off and on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's that back on again. There we go, nothing happening. This button here, blue, white, red, back to blue, back to white, and back to red. 3-stage power on this. 3-stage power, and it's not dependent on you 3-clicking your power buttons at, well, the power buttons here, so the actual power button to basically adjust the power is down here, and that's how you scroll through the 3 different power settings you've got in this thing. On this side, more fingerprint magnets. On this side, you have got the main body itself, and your charge port, which I think is kind of odd, is down here at the base. They had more than enough room to put the charge port, they could have moved this further up and just had a little LED here and had the charge port down here on the side as well, but they didn't. They went with putting the charge port at the base, which I think is kind of an odd decision considering how much room this is taking up. They could have went with a single dot LED mini bulb here, move this up and put that here, so the whole thing would be upright when charging. Why they didn't do that is anyone's guess. Anyway, that's the close-up of the Pasito Mini. Let's head back round to the main cam, shall we? So I've got this on. Where have I got this? I've got this on the blue power setting. Help if you had the pod the right way around, Vic. Blue power setting, airflow controls fully open, and they're off. There is nothing wrong with that now. They did send a spare pack of coils in. I have tried this mouth to lung with the 1 ohm thinner bore coil, and with a little bit of tweaking with the airflow control, you can get a 2 air hole Nautilus draw from this. So it's super tight, but not that tight. It feels like you're sucking a golf ball through a garden hose, so it can do mouth to lung relatively well. On the direct lung side of things, restrictive. It's bound to be restrictive because that air intake holes are not a very big one. It's not a very big air intake hole, so you're going to get a restrictive direct to lung from this, but it is a decent direct to lung draw though. Kind of in line with a lot of single coil RTAs that are currently out on the market, with the airflow control about a quarter open, so it's a very restrictive direct to lung, but it's not too restrictive that it ends up putting a lot of direct to lung people off. So it's a decent direct to lung from this. The star of the show for this thing though is the coils. I don't know who's making Smoant's coils for them, but the coils are pretty damn good. The flavour from the mouth to lung coil is phenomenally good as well, which is why I'm thinking it might be you, Well, that's making the coils for them. But yeah, the flavour from the mouth to lung side of things is phenomenally good. And for the direct to lung side of things, again, I've got zero complaints with the flavour from this really, really punchy flavour from these coils, which is kind of what you would expect for a design of tank like this, especially a design of AIO/pod that gives you 3-stage power, because that way you can either put more power into the coil for a warmer vape and more vapor, or put less power into the coil for less vapor, so you don't basically cloud up your room as much. It's a decent little bit of kit, folks. Comparing it to the original Pasito, which was released, what, 2 years ago? Year and a half, 2 years ago now, so there's been a fairly big gap between the original Pasito getting released and the Pasito Mini getting released. There's been some definite improvements. The coil, the flavour for the coil is better than the original Pasito, that much is for sure. And they've just tweaked things slightly. 3-stage power, rudimentary airflow control, ease of filling because the fill port is on this side, the airflow is on this side, so you don't need to actually take the pod out unless you're replacing the coil, so everything's ease of access as well. All in all, decent bit of kit. Definitely a decent bit of kit. It's that flavour. I'm really impressed with the flavour from this thing. Very punchy flavour. That was the Smoant Pasito Mini. Big thanks to the folks at Smoant for sending it over for a review. If you thought this review sucked, you know what to do down below. If that was good, give it a thumbs up. Very far side at the top, you've got the latest video, no matter what video you're watching on the channel. Underneath that's latest What's Up Sunday update vlog. In the middle, shout out to the hashtag Floof Army, the Patreon subscribe stars and the YouTube members for keeping Vaping With Vic afloat financially. That's what's keeping me in a job. And underneath me is the little click on that to subscribe. As always, folks, thanks for watching and have a good one.